So what we are talking today?
Whatever you want to really. Like, I guess the topic of DevOps is probably top of mind for both of us, right? So
Yeah.
I guess getting into that and yeah, diving a bit deeper into what we've been up to.
Yeah. So I have the same topic as DevOps, but you have 90 days, I have 60 days, and I have asked you previously when when I was talking to you before this new year that I have some problem that what will happen when the 60 days DevOps challenge will end, and how can I promote this? And I asked this question from Merino also, and he said that you should organize the Twitter Spaces according to this topic. So that's what.
Yeah. Yes. There's a few things, right? Like, and let's just rewind to the start of 2022 when so basically the background for anyone that is not aware of 90 Days of DevOps was on New Year's Eve, as you do, celebrating going into a new year. I had the idea that, okay, the first 90 days of 2022 is basically from January the 1st to March the 31st. It's the first quarter, it's the first 3 months of the year, and it lines up pretty nicely. And in the past, I've done like fitness challenges, and I've done things around that, whether it's like 90 days of 5K walks or 5K runs, couch to 5K type things. And I thought, how do I bring that into my like day job, and also how did it help me from a career perspective? So I started basically watching a load of much smarter people than me on YouTube and around the industry, and basically free content I was looking at on YouTube, and started jotting down notes in that 90 days of DevOps type format. So every day was a new topic, or every day was a topic that was, and we'd look at each day like a blog post. And then obviously for 90 days we wrote every day, and we covered some of the fundamentals of what I believe would be like the topics around DevOps. If I was getting started in DevOps now, these are the topics that I would want to understand and learn a little bit more about. You're not going to be a master of any of them, but you're going to have a better understanding of some of them as well. And I had so my background there is that I come from an infrastructure and operations background. I have a good understanding around like Linux and networking. I have a good understanding around infrastructure as code using Terraform. So I had a few kind of, and storing and protecting data. I kind of come from that data protection space. So I knew I had some safe modules, some safe areas to go and cover. And so that's kind of what happened. So 90 days and all of that content came out at about 110,000 words, lots of hands-on, lots of theory. So obviously I started that out as okay, this is going to be me writing notes. I'm going to use GitHub. I'm going to store it there, and I'm going to share it every now and again, like on Twitter amongst the network. Let's see if it's helpful, because I always find that whatever content I create, I want to release out into the public, because if it just helps one person, then it's worth doing, right? That's kind of been my ethos around community and content for my whole career, because I learn a lot from the community, so I want to give back to that as well.
Yeah.
So that's how it was, right? And it slowly started building up, like the traction, the stars, the other people sharing about it, other people creating YouTube videos about it, which was amazing. I can't remember his name, but I'll find it before the end, and we'll make sure that it's in the description. But there's a guy who started out. His name's Lewis. I think it's Tech with Lewis. He basically started doing like YouTube Shorts or TikToks, and he covered the 90 Days of DevOps repository, and he had like tens of thousands of views on that and likes on that. And obviously, as we went through 2022, I decided that I got asked actually to go and speak about 90 Days of DevOps at a conference at HashiConf. So I went there and I delivered that, and then a few others came up. So I submitted the call for papers for it and was successful. And that's kind of continued. And as we got through the year, obviously people were sharing it, and it was just going up and up. There's 20,000 stars on it as we speak right now, like maybe even 21,000 now. We're just short of the milestone. But the most important thing for me is a lot of people, because it was just notes, like it was very rushed some days. It wasn't necessarily polished. I just wanted to get the content out the door and learn something myself, fill those gaps in that I didn't have. And a large part of it was like there was spelling mistakes, there was grammar mistakes. So a lot of people were able to jump into that repository and make those changes or the suggested edits, and then they'd become a contributor to the project. Then an amazing thing happened around the summer, so July, August time last year, where people wanted to translate it. And people wanted to translate it into Chinese, Japanese, like Malaysian, like it's incredible, Vietnamese, incredible, Polish, Spanish, Portuguese, incredible. And so these people have been going through and converting or translating the days into their own language to help them. And then you hear that some of the big vendors are also using it internally. Microsoft, AWS apparently are sharing it amongst their new workforce, and so that's kind of why it's organically grown. There's the key part to it that I always wanted to keep that way was there is no proprietary software used in the repository, and I think you're the same with the 60 days, right? Everyone has the accessibility to it. So even if you've just got a very old laptop, you could still run pretty much everything that we're running through, and it's free. It's either free and open source, or it's a community freemium edition of a piece of potential commercial software. But ideally, it needs to be accessible by everyone. And fast forward to now, or fast forward to 90 days. 100 days ago was 90 days before the end of the year. So I just started resharing that. Just queued up a load of tweets talking about what that was, and then for 90 days just let them all go, and that kind of probably gave us another 4,000 or 5,000 stars that maybe people didn't have the awareness of back in the. A lot of people are getting into DevOps or platform engineering or automation space, the cloud space, and I think because DevOps isn't new, and I'm sure Bilal, you've got comments on this as well, but it's not new, but it just seems more applicable now out there in the wild. People are having to adopt that platform engineering, that DevOps type mindset and model to their business, because you have to do more with less. We're going through potentially a global economic recession is coming, so how do we do more with less so we don't have many people to do everything?
So it is organized, right? It's some kind of organized, right? This DevOps stuff is some kind of organized,
Yeah, exactly that. So I think that from a content point of view, that kind of leads us now into 2023, where we've gone again, and there was some gaps. Obviously, there's gaps. There's a lot of tooling and like methodologies that I didn't get to cover in that first one because I chose 7 days was a good number. So if you think about 90 days, you've got 6 days to kind of summarize what DevOps is, what the project is about, what the notes are, like the high level stuff, and then take 12 times 7, which is 7 days of the week, and you cover each individual topic to a degree of, right, what's the big picture behind infrastructure as code? What is some theory around some of the options? So what is Terraform? How does Terraform work? How do we get Terraform installed on our machine? And then some hands-on examples of how do we use Terraform to deploy an EC2 instance in the AWS free tier? How do we use Terraform to deploy a container in Docker? And just some hands-on examples. And every module is geared that way. So obviously there was gaps. There's areas that I didn't get to cover in the 2022 edition. So throughout the year, you're seeing how this is going like up and up from a popularity point of view, and because of that, it was like, okay, I know that I'm missing things like security, DevSecOps. 2022 seems to be a lot of talk about security and DevSecOps, and we know security in the wider world is very much cybersecurity, ransomware attacks. Like we're seeing it every day, and well, at least like I'm seeing it in my media. We're seeing big companies being hit by this. So I wanted to weave in that DevSecOps. So again, we've started off the first 6 days of 2023 with 6 days of DevSecOps, maybe a bit of a reflection on 2022 as well. And now, instead of me giving my perspective and my notes on this, I've gone to some friends in the community that are writing their perspective, and because they're subject matter experts as well in that space, and they're going to give their perspective. They're going to run through things like secure coding that Pratik's currently working on as well, and we've got Dean Lewis is going to talk about OpenShift later on. So it's not all DevSecOps focused. We're also going to go into like OpenShift. We're going to go into serverless. We're going to go into service mesh. We're going to go into some other areas. In fact, the last section of all is coming from a DevOps engineer. That's the best way to call him, Alistair Hay, and he's going to talk about the data operations around what. Okay, so we've set it all up. What happens now? How do we develop an API? How do we do this? How do we keep iterating rather than just always innovating? How do we iterate on this? So I think that'll be interesting, and it'll also help me gauge as to like, do we put any effort into this in 2024? Like, what's the need and requirement around that? And see what happens. And I love the fact that like it just rolls off the tongue, the 90 days of DevOps, and it's great that like people in the community have done either they've forked the repository or they've taken the idea and put their own spin, put their own perspective on it. And like Bilal, you've put some amazing videos together that kind of walk through that. One thing I wish I'd have done was actually more YouTube stuff, but you can't. I found out that you can't write 1,000 words a day with hands-on and create a video, and yeah, you've got to stop somewhere. But there might be a chance of going back and working through some of my days to again reform that that knowledge and understanding.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a bit of a long-winded overview of what we're talking about.
Yeah. So, were you planning to make it 90 days at the beginning when you were starting out? So. Yeah,
so it was always going to be 90 days. I guess I didn't know, I didn't know I was going to finish it because everything was live as well. Every single day I was writing something. There was a couple of days, I think, where I was maybe traveling, where I couldn't maybe complete one day, so I had to do 2 the next day. And by the end of it, I think the store and protect data, the 7 days at the end, I think I wrote all 4 or 5 of them in one day and submitted all of them, and merged them all into the major part. But by March the 31st at maybe 9 p.m. UK time, I was done. There was all 90 days in there.
All right. So when I started my journey, I started as a beginner. I was not like you, as you have a background in infrastructure, so that's the kind of thing. I was just starting out to learn myself. So that was my story, and I started out, and as a result, I thought that why should I not deliver that learnings of mine to other people through YouTube or through GitHub. So that was not intentionally that I was desiring, but I did it so that other people can also understand things that I'm learning, because as a student I can whatever the challenges that I'm facing, other students can also face those challenges. So that's why I made this 60 days DevOps challenge. At first I was thinking that I should make it 100 days, but after that I realized that it would be very difficult for me to consume all these things and understand it and make the content relevant to each day. Because creating a content on GitHub is different from creating a content on YouTube. So YouTube is really difficult to make a content, and especially for me as a non-native speaker of English, so it will be really difficult for a person to record one video multiple times. So yeah, so that's what that was my story about this 60 days DevOps challenge. And after that, the problem basically I had to move on. I have to move on further because I need to get a job. I need to get further about this, make further projects, contribute to open source, etc. So basically, the thing that I'm missing, that how can I promote this 60 days DevOps challenge, because I'm not just limited to this 60 days. I need to do further things like make further projects, contribute to open source. So these are the things that are preventing me to promote this or to find a way to promote this 60 days DevOps challenge. So how you will say that what are the ways through which you can promote it, like Twitter Spaces or what are the things?
Yeah, so I think Twitter Spaces are great, as Marino said, and Marino's just started 70 days of service mesh as well,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah,
I think it's becoming a bit of a trend, and don't get me wrong, I didn't start this, right? I think I put this in the first couple of days. Is so I got the idea kind of from I want to say that definitely Rashab, who's also helping me on a Python bit this year. Rashab and GPS, so Gwyneth, made by GPS, they started something called 100 Days of Cloud in maybe 2020, maybe 2021. And the repository, if you look at my repository, it looks very similar to them, and I call them out as a great example. And I started that. I got to day 36, and I was like, "Wow, like I'm already overwhelmed. I can't do 100 days of the same thing." Also, Anais did an awesome repository, or she's at least working through it. 100 days of Kubernetes. Again, 100 days of one. My brain doesn't work that way, so I had to think about how do I reduce that? And I only reduced it by 10 days. But how do I reduce it? But also, how do I make it different? Like, at least I was changing subject every 7 days. So I only had to write about monitoring, observability for 7 days. So it was quite easy to get into and know enough about it. Whereas obviously Anais and Rishab and GPS were going into a lot more detail, a lot more focus around cloud, and they've got their new venture around that as well. So that was kind of that. In terms of promotion, you've got Twitter Spaces. You can potentially, like, you have to build up that following first, is what I'm finding. I had a kind of an idea around, do I create something, a monthly coffee chat where maybe we do like a Zoom call, a locked Zoom call where we get people in, or I've started a Discord, so potentially do it in there where every month we just jump on a call, talk about what we're talking about, and just kind of chew the fat there a little bit around, like, what are people working on, what are people finding difficult, what are people learning. I think you've got to also, it's not all just Twitter, it's not all just YouTube. We have some amazing new places, new communities forming, like dev.to is a great place to also go and cross-share and cross-post the content that you've created. I think Hashnode is another great example of being able to share this, as well as like your own blog. If you've got WordPress, if you've gone through that, then that's another good place. LinkedIn, again, like if you're like Bilal, your prime example there is that you're looking for a role. What's the next step? How do I get that? Well, sharing in public, learning in public is great. Sharing in public, helping others is a great trait, and you should put that onto like more professional communities like LinkedIn. Hiring managers are going to be on LinkedIn. They're going to be looking for people like you. They're going to be looking for that content that can help. And all of that is hopefully going to give you the bump up that you need. But then also, like, so Bilal, I know you're working on a new project called ProcCTL? ProCTL. I think they're also great ideas. Whether that's a net new idea that you've got that it does what it does, and I'm sure you're going to cover that in another video. We probably don't want to take that here, but having that well-rounded like GitHub repository. If you think about your GitHub repository as your CV, this is what people are going to absolutely go and look at first. You can give them a piece of paper. They're probably not going to look at it. They'll probably skim it, but they're not going to look at it. They're going to go straight to your GitHub. What have you been doing? Oh, he's done this. He's done this learning in public. He's done some actual hands-on like he's a creator, he's a builder. He's going to look at that graph on your GitHub to see what you're contributing to, your source code. He's going to look at all of. They're going to look at all of them aspects to it. And the other big thing that I found that I thought was like kind of crazy is call for papers. I know you've submitted in places as well, and I have, like, around this. And kind of take it on that journey. If it's, and you get a good idea as to whether the content's well received and whether it wants to be seen. If it gets accepted once, that could be a fluke. If it gets accepted once, twice, 3 times, it starts to, like, you know that there's a demand for this. You know that people want to hear and see other people doing this. So I think that's where I'd go with promoting things.
So yeah, the call for proposal you mentioned that I have forgotten about it. I forgot about it. Basically, whatever call for proposals, whatever conferences you have attended previously, what was your what was your topic about that? What you were discussing in that 30 minutes, or because I may also may join in the future these things, because I'm just taking the idea that what were the things that you were mentioning in these conferences, because the 60 days DevOps challenge is huge. So it's not just limited to 60 days, because if a beginner wants to join this 90 days DevOps challenge, it will be really difficult for him to consume all the content in 90 days. So what are you discussing in these 30 days? So please mention.
Yeah, so you're not even getting into the weeds on any particular topic. But if you think about, like, exactly what were you looking for when you started, like, you fictitiously, you opened up a book and you went, okay, I need to learn DevOps, or I need to learn the facets of DevOps. These are the topics that I need to learn. But you didn't know what them topics were until wherever you went to get that, like, whether it was my repository, whether it was somewhere else, like, loads of people have made some awesome, amazing content. So really the session that I've put together, and I've got like a 15-minute, a 30-minute, and a 45-minute, which obviously just gauge how much time you can really spend on each subject. So, okay, we've got 12 different topics, plus one big one. What is DevOps? How does it work? What are the responsibilities of a DevOps engineer? Then you can kind of get into, why is it called a DevOps engineer? Why is it not just an engineer? An infrastructure admin should also be aware of DevOps. So I think the sessions that I've done, and I prefer the 30-minute mark because I think that's a good beginner-friendly session time frame, is that you basically introduce what is 90 Days of DevOps, how it started, basically what I just started with, right? This is the history of 90 Days of DevOps. It was an idea. I want to learn in public. The community is important. And then it went into, okay, so you want to learn a programming language, and then maybe just one slide on Golang versus Python. Why? Like, what are the 3 bullet points as to why? I don't believe, like, that could be one. Networking could be just to raise awareness of the OSI model, the application layer. Like, what does that look like? What does it mean? You don't need to just spend 5 minutes on that slide, like, just talking about that and visualize it, what a network is and what it does, what DHCP is, what DNS is. You could cover that quite easy in one, maybe 2 slides. Think about Linux. Like, there's lots to say about Linux. You could spend a whole week on Linux.
Yes.
But you've only got 30 minutes, so 5 minutes. What are the important parts of Linux? And my biggest takeaway for Linux is, well, make sure you touch it every day. Like, make sure that you've got either a virtual machine, a laptop, or something that you could dive into on a daily basis that allows you to get hands-on with Linux on a daily basis. My stretch goal is turn it into your work machine for a week. If you do that, and you can get your email, you can get your Teams, you can get your Zoom, you can get everything working, you'll be all right. You'll start to learn the basics of Linux and understand a bit more about the ecosystem or the community around Linux. And you can go on, like, so you're not diving into any deep dive. And I also got some ideas around that, though, because obviously what you've learned and what we've all learned over those 90 or 60 days, we've learned quite a lot about Linux. What are the commands? What are the fundamentals? What's the foundational knowledge that I need to get through? So what about, like, doing that as a session as well in the appropriate location, like whether it's Go4Con, talking about Golang, the basics of Golang, but just be very clear that this is not a technical deep dive. It's a very beginner friendly. I've spoken at, so I took it to HashiConf because a lot of the way through my 90 Days of DevOps, I use a lot of HashiCorp products. I use Vagrant, I use Packer, I use Terraform. So I could highlight those specifically. I then took it to like VMware Explore, which is very much people are just getting into this space. People are just exploring what DevOps is, and when you walk through it, a lot of virtualization admin, they have a knowledge of networking, they have knowledge of Linux. What they don't have knowledge of is the programming languages, the Bash scripting, maybe and that makes it less daunting. When you've got a good understanding of some of those, then it kind of helps lure you in. It's not as overwhelming to get into.
All right, so all the questions are done. So basically, what I was seeking, awesome. You have answered all of them. So I don't think that there is much left for this 60 days or 90 days of DevOps. So any further thing that you want to say or give me suggestions about this? And
yeah, I think the important thing is just to keep sharing and keep learning in public. That's that's the important part of it. There's not going to be you should always try and expose what you're doing on some sort of repository. So whether it's GitHub, whether it's a blog post, but just share what you're learning. And it doesn't always have to work as well. There's some days in 90 Days of DevOps where I've said, like, I've gone through a process, and instead of deleting it out and making it perfect, like a blog post, I've gone, that doesn't work. That's rubbish. Like, it should be like this. And then that leads to pull requests and issues being raised in other places. Just show the working. Like, we were told that in school. Wherever you are in the world, you're always told to like show your working. I think it's the same in the IT world, right? Yeah, so that's my last takeaway.
All right, so thank you, Michael. Thank you very much for giving me your time. So it is very informative session with you. So thank you. So
Cheers, Bilal. Bye.
Thank you.